fastest and slightly pink comeback knockout performed by Heath Herring opens our today's hit parade. The Japanese carried out a lightning attack with a kiss even before the gong and was also sent to the rest before the gong.
I'm not gay. I'm not gay.
As you may have guessed, today we will go through the brightest and coolest comebacks in MMA and recall the leagues that were once considered the main competitors of the UFC, but in the end fell apart and left only a fond memory behind. We are talking about Strikeforce, Pride and Elite Extreme Combat. There were also a lot of spectacular and exciting battles. One of the most spectacular fighters of Strikeforce and perhaps MMA in general was undoubtedly Kong Lee. Today we will remember his brightest confrontation with Scott Smith, whom many remember from the fight with Paul Daly, since you also need to be able to fly to the knockout so clean and graceful. Smith was a strong average with a wrestling base, and he knew how not only to fly away but also to send to a hard knockout. For this he was nicknamed Hands of Steel, and at that time of the fight with Kong, his record was 16-6.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's get it on! And we are underway. The main event.
Kong Lee was one of those fighters who brought what Van Damme did in his films to the real world, only without shouting and blind style. His roundhouse kicks, fronts and some other kicks were just incredible, and Scott had to experience all these things on his own skin. In the middle of the round, Kang drops Smith with a spinning back kick and starts ramming him with hammer fists. Another feature of Smith was a cast iron head, and in this fight it was it that helped him not to pass out and not to miss the most interesting.
Is one of the catches him with those shots to the ear, messing with his equilibrium. He was
So the first round ended with 2 knockdowns, complete domination, and Kang's joyful wife, who was enjoying out in the forefront watching her husband bring the whole audience to ecstasy this day. In the second round, Kang didn't let Scott even to a middle distance, constantly stopping him with his various kicks and issuing packs of knockdowns, one is cooler than the other.
punches, then the spinning back kick. One of the most dynamic strikers in the have been put around. Oh, can he make it 4 straight? Hurt Smith with that one, and again.
Another tsunami of attacks from Kang at the beginning of the third round, and it seems that Smith is about to collapse. But who would have thought that Smith and his iron fists would have the last word?
Kong's moving back. Oh, yeah. He's just got to finish him. Just tagged. He's just got to finish him. And he's got it on the ropes. Scott Smith delivering another right hand. He's just got to finish him. That's it. Miracle and San Jose.
Perhaps it was Kang's big advantage that dulled his sense of danger, and he was punished for that. Smith first hooked him with a left, and then hit him with a long series of punches. Pushing Kang to the net, Smith destroyed him with his right to the chin, after which John McCarthy intervened and stopped his mad outsider. Smith was totally losing the fight but didn't break down and found the power to come back. But these shots, when he holds his head and doesn't believe in what is happening, speak for themselves. With this knockout, Scott ended Kang's 0, since before this fight the Vietnamese had a record of 6-0, and Smith didn't refuse him a rematch, so in the next fight they met again. And of course we cannot pass by this event, since the second fight goes along with the first one, like Timon and Pumbaa, Beavis and Butthead, Connor and Whiskey.
Are you ready? Let's fight! And we're underway.
Smith realized that staying at a distance with Kang wasn't very wise and started the fight with big pressure and clinching, where his chances of not getting kicked in the head increased.
Already resorting to his straight.
Kang charges a good double and then sprawls Scott's passing and cheers Frank Shamrock, who was commenting on this fight. Lee met Smith hard with his left and then adds a high kick and presses his opponent to the net, finishing off with his knees. Until the end of the round, Kang will overwhelm Scott on the ground with everything he can, but Smith's cast iron head seems to only laugh at all these attempts to knock out his master.
Spinning kick! Scott Smith!
Hit him in the body. Hit him in the body.
And that's it! Kong Lee returns!
139 spinning kick from Kang, and the unkillable Smith was defeated. Lee punched his body, which wasn't as iron as the head, and the fight finally came to an end. Kang's excellent comeback on Smith's comeback, and with that the opposition of these guys came to an end. Each of them probably remembered these two fights well, but for different reasons. Kang because for a very long time he couldn't knock out this cast iron guy, and Smith because he refused to be knocked out for so long. The next hero I think doesn't need a special introduction since Sakuraba won half of his fights with comebacks, but today I wanted to focus on his meeting with Lithuanian light heavyweight Kęstutis Smirnovas. This fight took place at the Heroes 6 tournament in 2006 and was the first stage of the Grand Prix.
Sakuraba Kazushi ベスト4の最後の椅子をかけ8ヶ月ぶりの桜ミドルキックそれをかわした桜
Sakuraba starts actively, but in exchange he misses a left to the jaw from Smirnovas, who starts to smash Japanese on the ground and probably would have finished. But the referee, instead of stopping, decided that the fighters needed to take a more comfortable position in the center of the ring. He stops the fight and buys some time for Saku to come to his senses. Sakuraba survives as best as he can, but the referee doesn't seem to care much about his health and passive defense. He doesn't even think to interfere. The Lithuanian fighter is simply tired of hitting Saku, but the Japanese has recovered and now he is already extinguishing Smirnovas at the ropes and knocking him down. It was 6 minutes of uninterrupted rumble, so the forces of the fighters left completely, but Saku with a strong will goes to the armbar and finishes a tired and beaten opponent. A steep comeback from the Japanese, who as for me got a little help, but this doesn't take away his will to win and unbendable spirit. It was thanks to it that he took the victory in this difficult fight. To be honest, due to the damage received, Sakuraba couldn't continue the tournament and he had to withdraw from it.
Manhoof.
2003, Melvin had just started competing in MMA and by that time his record was 4-0. The fight took place in the Dutch promotion Too Hot to Handle and the opponent was the terrible Bob Schreiber, who by that time was already in his fall and managed to fight in many leagues and countries, as well as spill a lot of blood. Melvin starts very quickly, brutally smashing Bob across the floors and then knocking him down with a series of punches. Schreiber, who has gone through literally everything in his career, is himself a little shocked and doesn't understand what is going on. As soon as he gets to his feet, Manhoof breaks loose and begins to beat Bob with long streaks with both hands. To which Schreiber goes into a dull defense and simply blocks himself out trying to survive. Bob even starts to cheat and spits out the mouthguard, hoping for the help from the referee, who stopped the fight and gave Schreiber precious seconds to catch his breath. The last hope for Bob was his favorite takedown, because he merged 7 fights with submissions, but Manhoof blocked the first couple of passes, and only for the third time wrestler Bob was able to move the opponent down. This was the last and the only chance for Schreiber, and he made full use of it. Bob released all the rage and pain that he had endured throughout the fight. He delivered about 20 punches to the head of Manhoof and snatched the victory in this very difficult time for him. Powerful comeback from Schreiber and Manhoof's away flight. Melvin knew how to arrange fights, which were then remembered for a very long time, and he didn't always emerge victorious from them. May 2019, Bellator tournament in Britain, where one of the most promising middleweight fighters, Fabian Edwards, brother of the famous Leon Edwards, took part. By that time, Fabian had a record of 6-0 and got into opponents an average guy from Portugal, Falco Neto. The fight begins and Falco throws himself at Edwards' feet. Although not the first time, he puts the Briton on the ground and torments the promising from the side control. The whole battle took place in this mode. Once Edwards got to his feet, Falco took him down again and controlled him on the ground. After the first upkick, Falco was so surprised and at the same time intrigued by what was happening that he decided not to do anything and just watched how it all ended. Then Edwards stuffed him with powerful upkicks and finished the curious Portuguese at the end of the first round. Perhaps this comeback is a little less than those that appeared earlier, but I liked so much how he stubbornly went to these upkicks like a moth to fire that I decided this fight would definitely not ruin the whole picture. 2008, Alexander Slimenko was noticed in America and was invited to take part at the Elite Extreme Combat Tournament. An American Robert McDaniels, whose record was 12-4, was presented as a rival, while all his fights ended ahead of time and most of them were submissions. Robert began in an owner manner and immediately cut off Slimenko's oxygen. He constantly clinched at the net and pulled Storm to the ground, where he had an advantage. At the end of the round, things were really bad for Alexander. Robert took the back mount and was hitting Slimenko with punches, and also tried to end the fight with a chokehold. Slimenko, under the very gun, carried out a lightning attack with a flying knee, which became fatal for Robert. As a result, loud groans for the whole audience, broken ribs, and a strong-willed victory for Storm, who withstood everything that Robert offered him and then designed another finish for himself. Distant 2010 and the fight of the worst guy on the planet, this was exactly that people called Joe Warren, who was a multiple American champion in Greco-Roman wrestling, as well as the World and Pan American Games champion. He was opposed by champion Joe Soto, also a basic wrestler and the first featherweight champion in Bellator history, who was then holding a 9-0 record. In the first minutes, the impression was that the first defense for Soto would be an easy walk. He just playfully dismantled Warren in a stance, pure boxing style, and especially Soto liked how his uppercuts flew into Warren's chin, and in the first round he simply took the applicant to the boxing school. Warren tried to change the pattern of the fight by transferring to the ground, but not one of his attempts passed, so he was forced to receive blows to the head until the very end of the round. In the second round, something went wrong for Soto, who had already decided that the victory was in his pocket. Warren first dropped him with a hit to the temple, and then when the champion got to his feet, nailed it with a knee to the head. So Soto won the first round, but lost concentration in the second, and it cost him the championship belt, victory and retainer that peeled off, which left him out of the fight for a whole year. I think there will be enough comebacks for today. Too much is bad too. So if you liked the video and would like to continue, give feedback. Like it, write which comeback you like the most, and also leave the names of the fights that could be included to the next part. Well, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and press the bell so as not to miss new videos.